This is Matthew Mara, a regular in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And this is him in the next episode he's in. This is him in approximately 7 episodes. I said approximately because actually I was lying. It was only 3 episodes after the first one. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia might just be the only show where I know a guy is being punished over and over again for absolutely no apparent reason whatsoever. And all the while, he becomes something so much worse and darker and sadder. Imagine this. You hit your rock bottom, and then you hit your next rock bottom right after hitting the first one. And that continues for 10 or so straight rock bottoms. And at the end of it, you're like, maybe I'm not hitting rock bottom. Maybe I'm just free falling. Well, that's Matthew's story in a nutshell. And I don't know if any of the showmakers had a beef with any particular priest at some point in their lives, but what you're about to witness is utterly disturbing, dark, creepy, sad, and depressing all at once. Especially if you've never seen the show, let me tell you, you are in for a ride. So let's talk Matthew Mara. Why they needed him, how he has a new scar with each appearance, and why these things are even happening to him. Real quick before that, if you like Matthew Mara, then like this video. If you don't like him, then subscribe to the channel. Just kidding, you know what? I would really appreciate if you can subscribe and like the video. It helps me make more videos. Let's get right in. At first, Matthew Mara is just a simple soon-to-be priest with a master's in theology. But then Matthew decides that he's gonna visit his old high school, well, not friends, people that he knew, to see their alleged miracle at the bar. And let's stop right here. First of all, these are horrible people. They're all quiet little sociopaths in their own way, and they've been bullying Matthew since high school. In high school, he used to have these walking braces, so they would call him Rickety Cricket. They would even make funny noises like Rickety Cricket, Rickety Cricket. And at some point, they even promised that this girl, would kiss him if he ate horse feces. Horse feces, how did they even find that? Okay, so ultimately, he goes there. And I think as humans, we have the tendency to just ruin good things, you know? If things are going well, we somehow find ways to make it more complicated, to make it more difficult. Because think about it, Matthew must have seen the stain on TV, right? You know, the stain the bar owners claimed to be holy. So he likely knew it was not a real miracle, but the thing is, he was probably just trying to show those guys who used to make fun of him that he made it. No more leg braces, he's handsome, on his way to become a priest. He sort of succeeded, so odds are he was there only to show them off. I mean, that horse feces stuff, dude, that's scarring for life. Like, how many of you have memories from high school that you still remember now and then? I know I have a lot. Literally yesterday, as I was walking down the street, one of the memories just came into my mind and I was like, that still stings. But the guys at the bar, they'll just laugh at it. They'll laugh at your pain, humiliate you, then laugh again just because. Matthew Mara lost something that day, and no, it was not his virginity, as they clearly pointed out. He didn't even get to kiss Dee, but it was his trust that he lost, which ultimately might just be why he chose to become a priest in the first place. When you can't trust people anymore, you might just end up trusting whatever it is you can find. For him, that was religion. So evidently he goes to the bar and sees the miracle, talks to the gang a little, and that should have been the end of the story. But for the gang, this is only the beginning. You see, they can't just let something go. Like Dennis hearing he looks a little fat and deciding to stop eating altogether. They're obsessed. So when Dee is being made fun of by the gang on how she looks old and couldn't possibly win over Matthew anymore, she becomes obsessed and now has to prove them wrong. For them, everything is a little mind game and an opportunity to prove your point, no matter what the cost. They don't ever stop to think about how their actions might be affecting others or about consequences, as you'll see. So Dee goes to see Father Matthew in front of the church and tries to win him over. I feel like there's a joke in there somewhere, but you know what? I'm gonna pass on this one. And what we get is this strange phenomenon where when you're not available, people kind of start hitting on you. Even if they're not hitting on you, you think that everybody started to look at you the moment you got a girlfriend or you got engaged or whatever. But for Matthew, it's a little bit different. See, he doesn't have anybody in his life, well, except for God and religion, but it's an idea, right? It's a thought. So really, all he got is his faith, and it could be a lot harder to ignore his urges. So when Dee visits him a second time, you can tell how much he's struggling to keep it together. He keeps closing the gap, refusing to give in to Dee, but at the same time, he still wants her. All this actually feels eerily similar to the story of Adam and Eve. Like, think about it. The devil tricks Adam into eating the apple, so he gets punished and sent to earth. Only in this story, Dee is no Eve. She is the devil. And if Matthew Mara were to take a bite of the apple, he'd surely get kicked out of heaven. His current stable, peaceful, normal, and humane, dear God, very humane life. So he ends up quitting priesthood only for Dee to reject him again. Well, at least this time around he didn't eat horse shit, so they tell him to just go back and say sorry and continue with priesthood. And he says he can't. And if you're like me, you just took his words. But as I was writing this video, I got curious and I googled this. Turns out you can go back to priesthood. And it's not even a new acceptance, as this sort of thing could never really leave your soul or something. I don't know the whole logistics, but it's possible. So the fact that he doesn't even try kind of shows that he might have been flawed from the beginning. So this priest stuff, becoming a priest, for Matthew, odds are it was just an illusion. It was something that kept him going, even if it wasn't real. Like when you tell yourself that you're fine and then you go to Instagram and make a post about how you're actually doing fine. And it's a really long post that explains why you're fine and why people can be fine too. And it's all fine. It's definitely all fine. But in reality, you're not really that fine, which would also explain why he went to the bar when he did. And surely enough, the bubble pops. And Matthew sees himself for what he really is. He realizes that he can't just devote his life to religion and not live it to the fullest. But what he doesn't know is just how sinister this show is plotting against him. This guy isn't about to fall out of heaven to earth. He's going straight to hell, and he will not have a chance to repent, ever. And that last scene, where he's being offered to teabag Dennis as a sort of revenge to make him feel good, oh boy, I think that was his biggest L. L as in loss? Mistake. Fine, sorry, I was just trying to get used to the cool terms a little bit. Anyway, think of it this way. A second ago, he was a priest, so he would be maybe somewhere here, right? So the gang is kind of here. Now, I would go down to the floor, but the camera is fixed, so you just have to use your imagination a little bit. Just imagine my hand being on the floor for the gang. Let's say Matthew leaves priesthood, so he goes from here to maybe a little bit here. It's fine, he's still a good person. But then he accepts the teabag thingy and he goes all the way down to the same level of the gang. So now they're all on the floor. Now that is a hard fall, by the way. That's a big drop. That kind of fall will leave you dizzy. And at that point on, all he does is free falling. So for a while, it's all quiet. And we forget about him even. And then when we see him again, he's on the streets begging for money in his priest clothes. And he says that it's one of the darkest times in his life. I think the show didn't particularly like that line that Matthew delivered there. And it decided, nope, this is not the darkest time in your life, but this will be. So you try to get back your life together, begging and all, whatever it takes, right? And life decides to throw at you, well, I was gonna say lemons, but we're not at that stage yet. Oh yes, there is a lemon throwing stage. Here, have a look. No, life decides to throw at you Dee, again, and makes you start selling drugs because you've become a street urchin. And did I already mention how the gang was full of sociopaths? Right, so one thing they all have in common is manipulation. So being tricked by Charlie into moving to Dee's apartment is not that far-fetched. The downfall continues. He sells the drugs, but it's not over. Now we need to sell more drugs. Oh, and while we're at it, let's put some cocaine in his mouth to convince him. And Cricket, he just leans into it, He doesn't fight it. He lets it happen. Maybe it's because that's what he was taught, that whatever happens is God's plan. Like internally, he just lets everything happen. But we're giving a clue in this episode. Did you see it? You might not have because, well, it's not a clue. I'm just making stuff up on the spot. But hear me out. He asks if Dee has a dream catcher at her bedside. And I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. Like a light bulb appeared right above my head and I was like, whoa, what is that? And I just realized that with my left hand I was holding a light bulb. There was no reason for this to happen. I was just a bit confused, a bit sleepy. It's fine. The thing is, Matthew Mara just might be the very karma catcher of the gang or of the show. Like, sure, he's a random punching bag that the gang introduced to the show so they can have some entertainment and throw a hook every now and then when they get bored. But the more we see of him, in each episode, he becomes arguably worse. Like, his condition gets worse. You know, he starts losing his teeth, he starts getting scars, which confirms my thesis that he might be this evil energy draining device that whatever bad thing happens in the show will happen to him. The addictions, the pain of the gang, all of it is funneled straight into him so the gang can stay clean, pain-free, they can reset and start over. You know, I've talked in my other video about how in Sunny, there are no consequences. The gang does all kinds of evil and they get away with everything. But maybe this was the reason. Their sins get cleansed through Matthew. So while it may seem like there are no consequences, there actually is. There always was. And it evens out, right? Whatever the gang does goes straight to Matthew for him to pay. The gang never faces karma because Rickety Cricket is their karma catcher. But it's not enough. Not for the gang. They need him to be more than just a karma catcher. They need to be entertained. So they decide to hunt him in the next episode just for the thrill of it. And behind the scenes, my dude has already lost a tooth. He talks about whether they want to harvest his organs and stuff. Like, he's seen some crazy things out there. I mean, let the guy breathe for a second. Nope. Let's hunt him instead. And in the beginning, it's not just divine punishment. This time, the delusion is D. So he has chosen himself a new sort of goddess to believe in, to worship in, because his love for D is constantly reminded. So ultimately, he didn't lose his faith, he just replaced it with something new, a new obsession. But sadly, this one doesn't promise you a better life in the afterlife. This one just mocks you and calls you a street rat. There is not a single good thing that ever came out of Cricket's fate. Whoa, 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 nice moves. Okay, except for his parkour skills, I guess. But honestly, even that he probably only learned to get away from organ mafias, so... Oh, and by the way, his only other skill than that is his ability to replicate any man's poop. Allegedly. Just thought you should know. So the gang does a storytelling episode and goes back in time. Finally, some breathing room for Cricket. Well, we can call him Matthew again. But note how he is the enemy of the gang. He's British, right? A colonel for the English army, trying to take over the country. So even in an imaginary world, the show is loud and clear. It says Cricket equals bad, or Cricket equals enemy. And of course, karma catches up with him here too. Frank sells jammed guns to the army, which ultimately causes the downfall of the Brits. And then Cricket pays for it with his head, with the only gun that somehow wasn't jammed. Dude, this is like that bit from The Office where Michael is filming that homemade movie and, spoiler alert, he makes Toby's head explode. And he only does that because he hates Toby, his guts. But the gang doesn't really hate Cricket, just that someone has to pay for their sins, for their mistakes. And who better than Cricket? And now that he was taken care of, the gang can reset. Of course, it had to be the Bell of Liberty. That's all the liberty he'll ever get anyway. You know what though? There are episodes where the show teases with us. Like the first time we saw Cricket cleaned up again, looking slick, and I thought to myself, oh man, how awesome that they gave him a somewhat decent look and a decent life again. I guess he's back to normal. Turns out his normal was the suffering. Oops. And fool me once, shame on you. But fool me 99 more times, and you know what, man, just whatever. I really trusted you, Sonny. Why'd you have to play with me like that? So even if he's able to pick himself up, run away for a bit, karma eventually catches up with him. The sins of the gang keep on stacking, and then Matthew gets punished for them. I did, however, enjoy where Cricket, for once in his life, kind of stood up to the gang and got a few punches in. Oh yeah, let's go, Cricket! Throw sand in their eyes, yeah! He's definitely winning. Oh, wait, the trash man attacked him. Oh. And he's bleeding to death. Yep. Classic Cricket moment. But did you notice something? Even here, in a makeshift world, he was the enemy, the villain. There are also a lot of meta moments in the show that just literally scream in your face, look, we're making fun of him, and we're telling you, looking straight in your eyes, we're not looking at the camera, but you can tell we're almost looking in the camera, you know? For instance, how the gang keeps on giving him lemons instead of cash or food like they promised. When life gives you lemons much? Or when he becomes a dog janitor to clean dog diarrhea and then he gets into one of the dog cages to beg the gang to put him out of his misery. He says, pick me, just end me, which is so disturbing, man. I mean, was that supposed to be a funny line, a joke? I doubt that anybody laughed at that, and I'm saying this as a fan of the show. That just wasn't funny. But this is a moment of enlightenment for the gang, where they're like, oh wait, we need this guy. Otherwise, who catches all the bad karma? And they decide to let the dogs, along with Cricket, not even as a metaphor, but as a literal dog, by the way, free. And Dee says, let's just let these dogs and Cricket die like nature is intended, slowly and painfully. What? She's literally telling us, the viewer, look, we're making this guy suffer and we'll continue doing so. Laugh. Haha. Remember how in the box ring they left him to bleed out? Or when they shot him in the hands and instead of taking him to the hospital, decided to get supplies first? Those were actually huge risks that the gang took. Look, you can ignore him, make fun of him, lie to him, manipulate him, give him lemons, do everything that doesn't kill him. But you really can't risk losing him. So finally in this dog janitor episode, they realize that. They understand why the show needs Cricket. And when Cricket's love for Dee eventually fades out, it begs the question, what does he have left? Well, the answer is nothing. He's past the point of being a joke, and he's become something so much darker. Strip a man of his possessions, and he becomes homeless. Strip a man of his beliefs, and he becomes hopeless. Did that sound cool? I tried writing a line that you might hear in a Nolan movie, but I think I overcooked. What I was trying to get to though is, he starts talking about this Chinaman on the podcast, and how ever since his kidney got stolen, he stopped believing in God. And now that he also doesn't care for Dee, he's got no faith left in him. And belief can be sort of helpful, especially in those dark times. You tell yourself it's all God's plan, there is a greater purpose behind the suffering. Or you might think you're doing all of it for love, that someday you'll tell your children how you never gave up on their mother. But now that he's got neither, there isn't anything left to give his suffering purpose, something to console him at the end of the day. Okay, let's move on. Season 7, episode 12. Take a step back and look at this scene. What do you see? Do you see what I see? I see an idea of a seemingly odd man who reclaimed his faith and is finally back on his feet. But the metaphor is stronger. He can only ever be back to his calm, clean self when he's hidden in the clothes of faith. Which once again proves our point. Religion to him was just an idea. It wasn't about becoming a priest. It was about hiding his true identity, hiding his urges from the world. Look, we all have it. Some sort of mask that we use every single day to cover parts of ourselves that we maybe don't want everyone else to see or certain people to see, because not using a mask means showing your entire true identity, and that usually ends up in you lowering your guard down, and then you get deceived, lied to, or something worse. All the things Cricket is experiencing on a daily basis. And yeah, the grand reveal that he wasn't back to being a priest, and he was only pretending so he could steal people's valuables. What a twist! But honestly, if it weren't for the moment of them ripping his clothes apart, and him getting exposed like the vampire he is, screeching, "I have sinned," I don't know. I think pretending to be okay might just have helped him get back on track. Hiding himself again, realizing that the uniform is kind of protecting him from the evils of the show, it might have helped. You know how when you keep smiling, you can fool your brain into thinking that you're actually happy? Oh boy, do I feel energetic today. So acting like a priest might have persuaded him into becoming a priest again, or at least a bit more decent a bit more, protective of the real world out there. But that too is, of course, stripped from him. No pun intended. Actually, you know what? Yeah, pun intended, whatever. So all the bad karma he gets, if you've not seen the show, you might think there's no way this gang is that bad. Want to see some people that they have wronged? Not all of them. Here's them sitting at a table. See that guy? They caused a frenzy at his wedding, resulting in him losing an eye. This dude? They burned his car down and lied to him that his kids were at the party. This guy is like super rich, but he refuses to pay this guy's rent. And this is only some of them. And the only reason most people are here, they need something from them in return, like sandwiches or DVDs to rent. And guess who wasn't even invited? Cricket. He came anyway, hoping that they'd apologize to him for all the things that they've done. But they were like, what? Why? This is normal. The bad things happening to you? That's all part of the show, your reality. What's there to apologize? But since you're already here, you can eat from the floor like a dog would. I didn't make this line up. Dennis actually says that. And of course he's not sitting at the table. Of course he isn't, because dogs don't sit at tables. Here's another proof to my karma catcher theory though. The axe is aimed at Frank, who caused the whole wedding frenzy situation, but the person who pays for it is of course Cricket. And that's it. That's all the crazy things that Cricket faces in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Really? Do we have to? Sure. Let's continue. Yeah. Okay. I was told that I had skipped an entire page straight to the end, so we're just gonna do that page real quick. After this gathering, they leave Cricket in the apartment and screw the door shut. Yeah, you heard me right, they screw the door shut. As a fire breaks out, by the way. Like, whatever. And yeah, half his face burns down. Say hi to Freddy Cricket. Cricketger? Freddy Cricket, the Rickety Cricket. Yeah. If this were Batman, we'd have a huge revenge arc happening, but since this is Sunny, we're just cool with it. And the gang doesn't even remember anything because yup, exactly, good job, you're catching up. They've reset. The gang did something bad, karma took it out of Cricket, the gang has reset, and Cricket just has to somehow live with everything that's happened and survive as best as he can. The cycle never breaks. It could be several episodes in, and you know that whenever he comes back, it's gonna suck. He's gonna be in a much worse state. There's no surprises left. The show didn't leave room for the imagination. His fate is set in stone. In one episode, Charlie ends up painting Cricket's life, and I'm not going to tell you what the painting represents because I think at this point it might be against terms of services of YouTube. Anyway, here's the painting. Feel free to use your imagination, and here's a hint. Whatever you're thinking, it's probably 10 times worse that. Then we get an episode purely dedicated for Cricket, a fan episode. Rickety Cricket, the star of the show, at least of the episode. A turnaround point, a moment of relief. But this isn't one of those happy moment forever, happy ending stories in some maybe Disney movies. It's one of those, how in horror movies, they throw in a little bit of comedy or just a comedic moment to make the audience laugh or feel cozy, only to later scare the shit out of them, but worse. So they loosen us up a little bit, say, hey, look, Cricket is all good, he's back to normal, don't worry about him. Right. I mean, first of all, I really don't understand how the dad came out of basically nowhere and found his son. Okay, sure. You know what? At this point, I'll take it. Just give me a feel-good story for Cricket, man, even if it's only for one episode. So we've got a caring dad who finally has decided to help his son get out of this mess. We've got this guy, Cricket's brother, who for some reason screams every time he opens his mouth. Whatever! I don't know if that was an acting choice or the director's directions, but man was I annoyed. We see some light on Matthew Mara's face, and yes, he's back to being Matthew Mara, a human that has hope in his eyes. And it feels good, For those who've watched it, I'm just wondering, did you think he was gonna make it this time? I'll tell you what I felt. I thought that, yeah, he had found success, he had found some sort of loving companion, and I was excited to see this new direction of Cricket. And look, you can ruin a feel-good story in a number of ways. An earthquake happens and suddenly Cricket wakes up. He was dreaming. Cricket rejects the girl because he still feels like a priest. His father fires him because he's a lost cause. Cricket doesn't enjoy working, so he just quits. The moon crashes into Earth. I don't know, pick any of them. Even the last one is better than the one that we end up getting. They turn the girl into a dog. Because Cricket imagined it all. Look, downfalls can be funny. If someone makes a mistake, we laugh. It's called Schadenfreude in German. But this just feels uncomfortable to look at. Sunny has such an insane rewatch value, but odds are you skip this episode every single time. And you start to hate what they've done with Cricket. I'm not saying he isn't funny, he has his moments of course, but all this pain, and then the only rewards being tart lemons, has very little entertainment value. It was funny the first few times, now it's just cruel. Like imagine if they had actually turned him into a priest and then brought him every now and then for some weird crazy stuff, like maybe an exorcism episode of Dennis's ex-girlfriends. Say Maureen Ponderosa, the girl that does a lot of makeup and, weird plastic surgery to look like a cat. They could have said, we believe Maureen was possessed by a cat spirit, and then they do an exorcism or something. Or some other weird Ed Warren stuff or conjuring stuff. Nope. The show says, we got ourselves a punching bag and we're gonna punch it. So suck on that, viewer. And you can sort of tell from the IMDb scores, the fans weren't all that happy. I mean, if a guy falls on the ground, we laugh. But if you start kicking the guy on the ground further into the dirt, that just isn't funny. If you would treat a dog like that, PETA would find you and sue you. They're treating a human being like that and everyone is just ignoring it. Nobody does anything. And we're just expected to laugh and enjoy ourselves. The thing with Cricket is that they give him hope, not too little where he doesn't even try anymore, but just enough to keep him alive. And that's it. And in the latest seasons, the cycle of doom just simply repeats everything we talked about. Only difference being maybe that he's getting used to the scene now, to the idea of being a street rat. He's adapting, and you might be wondering, why does he have a tattoo on his face that spells slut? If you've paid attention, then you know the answer. I don't even think he did that. I'm pretty sure it was some karma thing happening in the background. And it took years, literally years, for him to finally kind of adapt to the environment. But it's not that much better than before. In fact, you could even consider it worse. He's a pimp now, selling other guys like himself to other guys. So where is he now? The last time we truly see him. It was in season 17. He's in dreadlocks with a totally different accent, apparently trying to find new clientele for his pimp business. And once again, the gang is surprised at this outcome. They have no clue what's been going on, why Cricket is in that position, how he even ended up there. And Charlie asks if this is a good plot twist. What's happened with Cricket? Like, it's weird. Wow, how did all this happen? My dude, the guy's been falling ever since the start of the show and he still hasn't landed. There never was a twist. It was only plot. This is the plot. And I would love to say that this was the end, we're done, but nope. Turns out he bit someone's off. Yep. Yes. I know that this information has absolutely no impact on the analysis we have done so far, literally none, but I just wanted to mention it, felt relevant. I didn't want to be the only one knowing that. So yeah, Matthew Mara, who was once on his way to becoming a priest, who had a master's degree in theology, a bright smile, a clean face, his dignity, ended up being a punching bag for the show. A karma catcher, a joke that just went too far. Without him, Sunny wouldn't last. The show needs Cricket to protect the gang from divine intervention, from consequences, so that they can keep resetting and not have to face any reality that might break them. Because if they break, then they can't continue doing what they do, which is being terrible to everyone, which is also basically Sunny's entire gimmick. So next time you see Cricket on your screen, you might want to pause and appreciate him. After all, he's the one suffering so that you can have something to watch while eating. You've just watched Fax Machine 9000. Thank you so much.